been here for about 3 months. I came from Colgate University. I'm here to learn more about this program because I think it's something really unique and amazing that Middlebury does that not a lot of places do.
I'm from Hamilton College. I'm involved with the Social Entrepreneurship Center or Social Innovation Center at Hamilton, and I'm here to learn more about the workshop and I'm interested in education.
You have an engaging group here today.
You do.
My name is Jose. I'm also from Hamilton College. I'm a social major with an interest in education, so I thought this workshop would be helpful.
So I have a nephew that's a freshman at Hamilton. His name's Casey, and I want you to take care of him.
My name is Nzwangi Tishoma, but I usually go by my nickname Prestige. I'm a Middlebury Center for Social Entrepreneurship Fellow, the new cohort along with Winston here in the room, I believe. I came to this particular workshop because my whole ideas about social innovation revolve around the education sector.
My name is Sebastian. I'm a Middlebury student, a freshman. I'm interested in entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship and education. I studied in Swaziland for 2 years and have been involved with several service projects there around education, and I'm interested in seeing successful projects.
My name is Bob Clark. I'm a Middlebury student from a long time ago, and I'm now the chairman of the school board for an independent school here in Vermont.
Oh, great. Tell us about the school real quick.
I'll steal some of the time. So
Do.
this is the principal of the school. It's Christ the King School up in Burlington.
Uh-huh.
It's great.
And I haven't paid him yet today, so he would have said more. I am the principal at Christ the King School in Vermont, and I was interested in coming today because social justice has always been a pillar of Catholic education, and being able to integrate that very important aspect into the daily lives of our students is.
Well, I'm sure you know that the idea behind Covenant Prep has its roots in the Jesuit community.
Yes, as I was reading up on it a little bit,
Right.
I think that's wonderful. Thank you.
I'm Maya. I'm a senior here at Middlebury, a physics major, and I'm in the social entrepreneurship class right now.
My name's Fritz. I'm a Middlebury junior and an English major. I'm also in the social entrepreneurship class, and I'm here because I'm interested in this process of meaning making and launching a career in the common good.
You're wondering how you're going to eat?
Exactly. That's such a good question.
All right, Ted.
I'm Ted, retired from an entrepreneurial business career in 2001. Came out of retirement at 9/13 and spent most of the last 12 years in Afghanistan with SOLA having been the last half of that. And I'm here because we have so much to learn. Yes, Shabana has a lot to offer, but we as a whole have a whole lot to learn.
All of us have a lot to learn, right?
My name is Winston Law. Like Prestige said, I'm also a CSE fellow. I'm a sophomore from Seattle, Washington, and I'm interested in being here just because I also went to an independent school, and it'd be great to learn more about how that gets started and what that looks like for you as well. So thank you for coming.
I'll tell you the good, bad, and the ugly.
I'm also recording, so I apologize if it's distracting.
So I'm Tatiana Maslova. I work mostly in Russia, in small Russian towns and cities, and we work with Russian young people. This conference is extremely interesting for me.
Great. I'm Hal. I'm on the advisory board for CSE, and I direct the Partnership for Change, which is an initiative in Winooski in Burlington, Vermont. And we have a pretty ambitious goal to remodel the high schools into student-centered, proficiency-based learning systems. So it's really founded on three principles of equity, community engagement, and technology. Yet equity is really, I think, the thread that we really need to figure out, so all kids get what they need in order to be successful in education.
I'm John Isham. I co-direct the center, and I'm here because 2 years ago or so, a colleague, John Cormier, said, "There's this guy from Connecticut." And he was right. It was a thrill to meet Jeff, and as I told him a couple months ago, in some ways this workshop is just a total ruse to get him here. To see what's going on. But I knew we'd learn something about Covenant too. So thanks
Somehow
for
it
coming.
says that. Well, thanks everybody for sharing some of their thoughts and personal perspectives. I guess I'll tell you my story, maybe a little bit more detailed than what you all had time to do for the group. I'm a small town kid from western Pennsylvania. The town I grew up in had one street light, no McDonald's, a bank branch where my dad worked, lots of deer, lots of trees, fish, that kind of place. My entire family headed toward State College, Pennsylvania, but for some reason I met this guy at summer camp where he worked in high school who was here, and he said, come on up and check it out, I know you like to ski. And so somehow I ended up in Middlebury, Vermont. And of course, you know, like many of you, it's an experience that changed my life in a huge way. I became a Democrat. Much to my dad's chagrin. I learned to think broadly about the world. And I'll never forget the first lecture that I attended at school. It was given by a guy named Vince Malmstrom. It was over in the hemisphere, I think, Hemicycle?
Yeah.
Still exists?
Yeah.
In the Warner Center, which was the science building at the time. And Professor Malmstrom put this map of Eastern Europe up on the screen, or I guess it was, he pulled it down, unrolled it at the time. And it was a map that was drawn in the Middle Ages when sailing ships were the way people got around the world. And the question what posed to the group was, why on this map is the Black Sea the same size as the Mediterranean Sea? And so the entire hour-long lecture was about a discussion of why that was. And it was this iterative thing, and I never forget, Vince pointed at me, and I was cowering in that corner. Called me out and said, you know, he actually knew my name the first day, Mr. Digel. You know, could we just come down here and lead a discussion about why the Black Sea might be as big, you know, appears as big as the Mediterranean. Well, that was the difference between the kind of education I experienced in a small public high school in Pennsylvania and a real sort of critical thinking based dialogue that I experienced here. Now, we can talk a lot about the problems of access to the quality of the education that's available in a place like this. And I bet we will later in this session. But I sort of relate that personal experience by way of illustrating, again, something we all know, is that quality education thing is just critical to the future of the world. So I graduated with, you know, history and geography and environmental science in my background and ended up in the finance business where I met my wife, who was my first boss. I got interested in, can't tell you that whole story. I got interested in commercial real estate capital markets work and was fortunate to end up being able to help found a company based in New York that rode a wave of asset-backed financing in the early 2000s to the place where one morning I was somewhere in some hotel somewhere and my wife called and said, Jeff, I know you love that job, which I was totally obsessed with, but you have a choice right now. It's either me or that job. So, you know, I love my wife, and she's always right, on the big things at least. And so I left that world in 2007, and I ended up back at our home where we raised our two boys, you know, in the wintertime, walking around the house at 10 o'clock in the morning in my underwear, you know, what's next? And about that time, I was working on a project for Habitat for Humanity in Hartford, and the mayor called me up and said, Jeff, I just met this young man that wants to start a small school. He's been working in that school in New Bedford for 4 years. He needs some adult supervision. So he and I met, and Patrick took me to New Bedford to see the school. And that morning at the morning assembly, this young man named Enrico showed me around the school, which he was so proud of. And I had an experience with him that I fell in love with. So I thought I'd show you a little video, and if I can.
Very sophisticated, generous, inspirational, or a teen.
Can anyone hear that?
I would describe this opportunity as one chance.
You would only want to come here if you want good education, you would want a better life.
Challenge to me means like motivation, because that makes you want to do harder to be like, see, I can do it.
I am serious about education.
I make smart decisions.
I abide by community rules.
When I leave, I tell my parents, I learned something new today from my teachers.
They always believe in us. They always think that we can go higher and higher.
And they do it because they want to help us. They want to help us have a bright future. I strive for higher education.
I value my character and my reputation.
I accept challenges. I want to keep this to my memories because this will be like an awesome time to look back to when I grew up and have a good job.
Like through the 4 years I was here, it just made me work harder to be better than I was.
We would now like to present to you the graduating class of 2013 of Public Preparatory School.
So Patrick takes me to a similar school in New Bedford, and I fall in love with this young man that was totally committed to the place. Covenant Preps is aimed at creating a community that builds character and delivers a almost round-the-clock educational experience. So it's based on an extended day format, extended week, and extended year. It's tuition-free. It's aimed at underserved Hartford boys. It is staffed by AmeriCorps volunteers primarily. So we're always struggling with the balancing the equation of affordability and quality. And I was telling somebody we have another board meeting on Sunday to talk about just that. How much money do we have to spend to solve the problem of delivering the highest quality education that we can? So that's the summary of what the school is. We are in our 6th year. We have 60 boys in 4 grades, grades 5th through 8th. We have a staff of 9 full-time teachers. Each of those recent college graduates is on a 2-year program, commitment to the school. Sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 1, so the average stay is about 2. Each of those teachers is paired with probably a recently retired educator to help them through all the problems that a young teacher will face as the fire hose hits them, and how do you manage 15 or 18 kids in a classroom. So that's the model. I have a handout that we can use to talk about some of the topics that we've faced as we've gone along. But as I said, my initial partner was a young man named Patrick Moore who basically knew how to run a school like this. And I became the guy with gray hair that knew some folks that might be able to give some money. So I built the board and did the initial fundraising. The funding model is as follows. We located the school next to two large corporate institutions in Hartford, guessing that if we were their neighbors, they'd probably support us. That has become the case. Our budget is about $900,000 a year. 10% of that rent, and the rest of it is labor costs. Almost all of the rest of it is labor costs. About 20% of that comes from our corporate neighbors. We have some local foundations that support us for another 10%. And the balance of it is one by one individual private donors. The funding strategy on the individual giving side is each student has a sponsor, financial sponsor that we build a personal relationship with. Those sponsors commit $5,000 or $6,000 a year to fund the student. And there's a series of relationship building meetings between the sponsoring family or golf group or book group and the students that help sustain that relationship and connect a funding stream to the individual student. At this point, we have a student community of about 100 kids. 60 are actually at the school and 40 are graduates. And a very important component of our pitch to the students and the families are that we have a robust high school placement program that is staffed by volunteers. That group, in conjunction with the families, help our kids matriculate to the best high school opportunity possible. Sometimes that involves funding from the Covenant community, and it always involves funding from the independent or parochial school communities that they attend. At this point, I think the financial support that our students have benefited from their high schools totals $4 or $5 million, and I think the math on the funding support for high school from our community is almost $1 million for high school support. That's kind of the summary of what it is. I like to spend some time on what the issues are and the problems, because that's as important as to the sustainability question, and it's kind of where we are right now. These kinds of organizations, at least from what I've read, go through a life cycle. There's an initial burst of energy that's driven by, sort of the visceral love and personal reaction that you get by meeting a young man that really wants to propel his life. But that is a difficult thing to sustain for maybe more than 3 or 4 years. We're 6 now, so I think we were lucky. We're facing that point where the question is, how do we rejuvenate the board, and how do we rejuvenate our volunteer base? And, frankly, at this point, I'm a little burned out. There's a burnout factor in all of these enterprises. So our next step is how do we create a board leadership and executive leadership at the school that is going to propel the place to its next level. We have a great reputation in the community, both among families and our alumni, among the corporate leaders in Hartford and the community leaders. But we're at the point, as I said, where how do we keep it going? John, it'd be interesting. You've spent a whole bunch of time in this world. What do you see out there? You see 50 of these things.
In terms of sustainability?
Yeah.
I don't think there's
after that first burst of energy starts.
Yeah, we
right?
touched on it. I mean, I don't, as you know, there's no magic bullet. I mean, I see it even if this is a way to answer. I'm on the board of St. George's School where I went.
So that's been around for, 110 years or so now. And while they have an endowment, so it's pretty good, the issues feel the same in the sense of the kind of urgency of always needing to find the new blood, if you will, of leaders. So we've had a board chair who's been doing it for years. He can't do it forever. New sources of funds, because none of these places can work, Middlebury included, without ongoing funds. So I guess I would just simply say that experience has taught me that as long as there are schools like this, there will be that urgency, right? And whether that's any comfort for a startup, I don't know. It seems to me the good news, and I was thinking of Ted's experience too, is the intense interest and understanding of the power of education as a model of social change. And as you know, as you suggested, it only takes one or two philanthropists. Again, to go back to my St. George's experience, we're about to do a big capital campaign, and we know that that'll succeed when we find that one big donor. So it sounds like you've had at least one. But I get it, like you said, Jeff, that it's this big labor of love, right? I mean, that's the part that you know is going to happen.
Yeah.
Prestige, when you go back and found your school or join ALA or SESHI, it'll be that same thing.
Right.
So that's, I'll share. Ernie, who's behind us, actually, maybe you can share because of your experience with Allen School. That's 10 years, if you don't mind. Yeah.
I'm Ernie Perizzo, and one of the groups that my kids, I have 4 kids, we're very fortunate to get involved with is a semester program where you leave your high school for a term, your sophomore, junior year, go for half a year to essentially the jungle in the Bahamas, and take regular high school classes, but live a completely different lifestyle than most American, or even Bahamian kids' high schools. And it was founded by a couple who had quite a different background. He had been in the Navy, and a Navy SEAL, and then became a teacher and left, and she worked at school too. But I think, you know, that we constantly, they're 15 years old now, we constantly talk about the problems that schools have had getting beyond their charismatic founders, surviving beyond it. And how do you create a culture where the next tier of people in the school have enough of a career opportunity that they want to stick around, they got enough challenge, there's enough opportunity that they can grow and become leaders and take the place of people that get too old and grumpy and stuck in their ways to keep it going. And I don't have any, we haven't figured it out other than try to think hard about career paths and creating and spending money and knowing that that the business model is going to be more expensive than it can be, because you're going to have to provide opportunities for that next layer of people to grow and develop, and if you want them to stay. Otherwise, they'll come and hang out for a couple of years. And for us, we don't pay very much, but you get to live on the beach. But people only do that for 2 or 3 years, and then they fall in love and they have a baby, and they say, geez, there's only one doctor on this island 100 miles long, and there's no hospital. I'm not having my baby here, and there's no elementary school. So we've essentially had to build a community. We started a middle school for local kids, so that because we saw a need. We started a child care center for faculty kids because we wanted to have faculty who had kids and wanted to stay. I think we're going to end up in elementary school. So we ended up creating an entire learning community in the middle of nowhere over time, but it's all to get beyond the charismatic leader who at some point says, God, I need a break. I need a deep breath here, right? Or God forbid, I just got an email from the CFO, interestingly. I said to him, we had a board meeting, I said to them, the story of McDonald's moved me a few years ago. I don't mean to drone on, but I think it's instructive for all organizations. CEO of McDonald's died on a Friday afternoon one day. Heart attack, completely and on Monday, the board of McDonald's announced a new CEO and a plan and said it's really terrible he died. He was a great guy, but we've lost, nothing will be lost here. We got a plan, we're moving forward, because every year for the last 8 years, we have had a session where we plan a succession plan for every key leader in the organization. And we talk about it. What happens if he disappears tomorrow? And we have that plan, and we write it down, and we have step by step how are we going to move forward. And I said, that's such a great discipline. Organizations don't do that. We got to do that. And I got an email from the CFO the other day. He goes, it was like my get hit by a bus list. Here are all the things. And it was little stuff like, here's the password.
Right.
Right? If you want to get in the HR payroll software, here's the password.
Right.
Or if you want to know who you call to get the janitorial service taken care of, here's the guy. And I was like, wow, you know. So anyway, that's what I've
Have you
learned.
been hit by a bus list, Don?
No, I don't. No, but actually, we did the same thing at the school where I am. Exactly, I had a succession plan.
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
Nobody wants to talk about it. It's hard.
Yeah.
One of the questions we're facing, right, we have, like, our lead executive is going to change at the end of the school year. And so our choice is probably between somebody like our current executive, who is, 2 years from retirement, but he has run independent schools from the day he was born, more or less. The alternative is a really committed 26-year-old woman who has been at the school from the very beginning. And she has the love and always will have the love and the energy and all the stuff, right? To your point. And so what do? You always sort of check your gut first, right? I think we go with the 26-year-old because I'm certain that we don't have to answer the question about whether the energy's there. You care about being there with the kids on Friday night. I mean, I don't know. Does anybody have any comments on that? You're a leader at your school, right?
You mean versus the veteran leader?
The veteran expert. Let's say, he or she's, a seasoned expert that knows what to do in every circumstance because, he or she's been there, right? 26-year-old has seen 10% of the circumstances.
Well, there's no accounting for genius. There's sometimes a 26-year-old is excessively capable of a steep learning curve, and then you couple that with energy and enthusiasm. That can be an amazingly winning combination. The idea is that no organization is successful. Should hinge on one individual. So ideally, that if it was that 26-year-old, then that person would have a support system that would provide a continuum of experience, that advisors, so that energy doesn't burn out, so that he or she has that continuum of the history. Because even though your history is only 6 years old, it's important. History is important, and having a history with the community around you, so that you can tap those donors and those kinds of things. So. I think it's hard to say based on paper alone, which of those two individuals would be more successful. But ultimately, when an organization hinges on one individual, that's when it starts to spiral.
Any other thoughts?
I have a question. Who are your partners other than AmeriCorps? Obviously you have a volunteer base. Who are some of your partners?
In terms on the service delivery side? Well, our local corporate neighbors are both givers at the individual level and volunteers. Our high school partners, right, are independent and parochial school high schools that our kids end up in are clearly our partners, right? Because those organizations are funding anywhere between 100 and 60% of the cost of high school. So I would say the high schools are our key partners. In terms of funding partners, I mean, I haven't figured out a better way a more efficient way to raise money aside from families promising $5,000 or $10,000 a year, because they get personally connected to it. And the attrition rate on those types of donors, which fund 70% of the budget, is 15% a year. So now that we're established, the work required to identify new folks like that is much less than it was at the beginning.
I guess my next question would be, how might you engage the greater community? Up in our initiative up north, we had the mayor spend a week inside of our project, and he's got the bug. He's a huge partner now in supporting our work and connecting us to other support as well. And we also have discovered the power of student voice and student leadership. They're our secret weapon now. So I just think it's important to figure out how you can grow your community engagement. And there are different techniques to do that, but the CEO of Nellie Mae Education Foundation, who funds our project, has a lot of faith in what we're doing and how we're doing it, because we have very, very strong community engagement. And we're in a public school system, so it's obviously a different funding model, but we're trying to change how we deliver education.
Right.
And his sense is as long as we have the community strongly behind what we're doing, they will sustain this change.
We toyed with actually an idea that I proposed about a year ago. There's a fairly powerful charter school law in Connecticut, and a very growth-oriented and innovative charter school company that I got friendly with over time, and I'm now on the board of. The leader of that and founder of that company and I were talking about the possibility of combining our resources. Like our strategic strengths are probably the high school placement and graduate support that we have in the independent and parochial school world, coupled with, a capability of raising private money. And so the thought was couple his expertise and resources that comes from state funding of his charter school with our strategic capabilities in graduate support and placement and private fundraising. And it was very interesting, the board's reaction to that, because I advocated the idea. There were some problems around how our kids were going to gain access in a democracy to a public school effectively, but we thought we had a solution to that. And our board was so personally committed to the idea of their own show that I couldn't convince them that maybe there was a bigger idea here. So that's another growing pain that we've gone through, that we've sort of passed through the gauntlet on. Is everyone familiar with the problem of urban education, especially in a place like Connecticut? Connecticut has 169 municipalities, and each municipality is responsible for its own education, for educating its kids. So as a result, there's this massive balkanization of the way education is delivered in the state. It's the richest state in America, but at the same time, the 4 or 5 urban cores that date back to the Industrial Revolution, Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport, London, have zip codes that are among the poorest zip codes in America. So in a sixth sense, we're very good at concentrating poverty in Connecticut because of the way the state evolved. So if you look at Hartford itself, there's a 120,000 person population, 19,000 kids in the school system. When we started the school, the high school graduation rate was 32%. Unbelievable, right?
Yes, yeah.
Right? That's 3 miles from where I live. Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on this statistic, but I think the percentage of that population that graduates from 2 or 4 year college on a normal schedule is like 6%. Now, a lot of good things have happened since then. The state government has piled just hundreds of millions of dollars into the urban cores in Connecticut. I think with some positive effect. If you add up some of the cost per students in the city, the number comes to $25,000 or $30,000 per student, which is an enormous number. Because there are layers of funding that are driven by the politics of the situation. But nevertheless, all that money is having a positive impact because much of the changes in the public school system is aimed at delivering independence at the local school level, both through the charter school systems and a state-run school bureaucracy that was aimed at responding to a discrimination lawsuit that occurred 20 years ago or so. So that's the definition of the problem, right? Among the poorest neighborhoods in the country, 33% high school graduation rate and a 5 to 10% college success rate. So compare that to what's happening at Covenant Prep, and we're coming out with flying colors. I think 38 of our graduates are succeeding in high school to varying degrees. A couple have made some horrendous mistakes, but at least in one case has picked himself up nicely. And we're just beginning to design the way we will support their and their families' approach to higher education. So, are there any questions?
Not a question, Jeff, but a comment on how SOLA got to where it is funding-wise. But starting off with SOLA's youngest student is Khadija.
Mm-hmm.
She's deaf. She's at the American School for the Deaf, 1817, West Hartford. Mm-hmm. And what an incredible opportunity that is for her. She's,
fabulous. That's a great place.
But we started off SOLA with my having both my retirement income and a part-time job in Kabul. That part-time income, which was $4,000 a month, went into funding 100%, into funding our need. It paid the rent, it paid for the guards, it paid for food and so on. And we did that for about 3 years, basically while Shabana was getting ready to graduate from Middlebury. I had a hell of a time with our board in 2012 when I said, Shabana is the one who ought to be running this school. She was 21 at the time. But Ted, all the buts you can imagine.
She's 21. Right.
I pointed out that at the lowest point, the bank balance when I was running the school was $11.06. And if I'm lying, I think it was $6.11. Plus a credit card.
Right.
And a year and a half after Shabana has been running the school, we have $240,000 in the bank. We have $1 million grant that is all but assured over 4 years. And our budget has gone from about $800,000 to $1.7 million. Our cost per student, when you factor in the fact that we still have costs for those who have graduated from SOLA in Afghanistan and are here, is about $11,000 a student. We're very, very proud of that. The funding for our kids' education all comes from their schools. Some of the gals that you've heard from SOLA, they have scholarships that range anywhere from, I think the smallest is 98%. There are two of them there, we call them 110% scholarships, where they cover the medical insurance and books and stuff. So, but the major question was really whether or not Shabana was capable of managing something like this at age 21 with no prior experience. And she has proven, just literally beyond any question whatsoever, totally capable of doing that. So I have split myself off from the school now. I actually stepped off the board at our January 4 annual meeting, and am starting a for-profit entity within Afghanistan, the purpose of which will be to provide jobs, management jobs, for our women as they come home from Smith and Wellesley and Mount Holyoke and Yale, wherever they happen to be. And to, in time, provide a source of non-donor income for SOLA. Now, the Afghan economy is down here somewhere. I don't happen to believe it's going to stay there. I think it's an entrepreneur's dream, if you will, in terms of what could happen. So that, in very, very general terms, is our game plan. I'll cut myself off at that.
You could go on.
I could go on.
Right? Anyone else? John?
So, since Shabana began last night, we've thought a lot about educating girls, and yet you're educating boys. Share with us why that was such a key target audience in the Hartford area.
Well, I should have mentioned that as part of my description of the problem, obviously. I think the problems of, American urban young men are very well documented. And
African American in particular.
African American in particular. Our population is, at the school, is about a third Latino, 2/3 African American, which mirrors exactly the proportion of those two populations in the city. And so the answer is that simple.
Yeah.
Let's focus on the young men that have such a well-documented problem.
And you bring the families in and all sorts
Right.
of things. I'm sure.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the big debates we've had throughout is given our resources, which do not include the availability of a psychologist or a social worker or those kind, how does our admission process work? What's the population of underserved kids that we can best serve? How can we be most effective? With what students can we be most effective, I think is the question. And frankly, we've gone, this pendulum has swung wildly, not wildly, but, fairly widely in terms of, should we have a income limit in terms of the family's, income that we accept. We decided that yes, we probably should, because that's part of the fundraising pitch partly. And frankly, our mission is to serve underserved, which has something to do with family income. But the truth is, if we attempted to serve exclusively the lowest income families in the city, we don't have the resources for that, right? We just don't. And it took a long time for the board to admit that that's the case. The debate still rages. I'm sure it'll come up on Sunday. Anyone else? Yeah.
Yes, just I apologize, but I've lost. I was actually in the classroom with the class for quite a while before I found you. So you alluded just, and you might have already covered this, and if you did, you can just cut me off, about talking about engaging families. And my question really lies in, I work in a community college in an urban setting, Springfield, right down the road from you. And what I have found with my students is the need for wraparound services and a holistic approach. I deal with the same population. They're just lucky to have gotten out of high school, and they are really, I consider them almost like vocational high school students in a community college setting. 80% of them test below in English 100 and basic math. And what I have found in terms of success is that I cannot even address what's happening academically until I get my arms around them emotionally, socially, and really survivally. Looking at homelessness and poverty and having to get a job and get a car and going home and getting beaten at night, or seeing their father get beaten, or there's someone who was murdered in their neighborhood that day. And I guess what I have likened to this experience too is I was a criminal prosecutor. I was successful because you walked in. I never asked you to tell me the truth, the job. I gave you everything. We had social workers. We had, if you needed glasses, we got you glasses. Wraparound services, and then someone can do the job you want. And I think the same thing so applies to education, that looking at it in this one pointed, like we can teach someone and then they will thrive. It's almost an impossible ask of somebody, that there's so many other things that we need to build up in the educational setting that I feel like there needs to be cognition. And
I think you have to say, what we've said is, we can't solve all those problems, but if we say that the school time is 7:30 to 6:30, and that is Monday through Thursday, and on Friday you stay for dinner or a snack, and then we're going to play in the gym or have a dance or something. And then there's something to do on Saturday, and then after a 3-week hiatus after graduation, there's 6 weeks of summer activities that are part fun and part, academic. And then there's 2 more weeks, and then you're back at school. So part of what we're doing is creating a neighborhood that's safe and secure, and the kids generally, want to be there. So, that's not a complete answer, but on top of that...
enough, that time is enough to sort of buffer the other experience, the real world experience of returning to home and what that means.
Yeah, that's the idea. In no way does it work 100%, but, I think it has an impact.
I'll say another thing that I love about this and this wonderful sort of systems kind of thinking you brought to a comment I want to make relates to our students, and I think about this a lot. One often thinks that to be a change maker you need to go somewhere else. So like in my case I went to Peace Corps, and that was a wonderful decision for me. But I didn't know anything about Benin, the country I lived in. But often we know, and this is obvious, that some of the greatest challenges are right where we are. In fact, one of the other sessions right now is about challenges that the Bridport School faces about 10 miles from here. So you're reinforcing that to me. I know when you're young, because I did this, it's exciting to go somewhere, but it is also exhilarating to think about what you can do, in your case, literally in your backyard.
Yeah, personally, that was a fabulous aspect of the whole exercise from my point of view. My professional life was always somewhere else.
Yeah.
I was flying somewhere, and my clients were somewhere, and, like that. So, those associations for me locally didn't exist.
Wow.
So I had to build that, and I had a chance to build that as part of this project. And it was a spectacular thing for me.
That's a double-edged sword from the business model, though, because as we've seen, there's a lot that's pretty sexy about Afghanistan. It's a place that people understand. It's got all kinds of different messages coming out of it. It's far away. We've never been there. I want to understand it here. But I said, geez, I'm working on something down in East Hartford. Like, well, yeah, there's a lot going on. Yeah, that's all I read about, right? Why would I, So I could, to me, it underlines the brilliance of your personal connection between the donors and the students and develop relationships. And because if you can build relationships, whether it's with the students who come here from Afghanistan and you say, oh, geez, look at these are real people, or your students, then it works.
The first pitch when I'm, selling a prospect, right, this is kind of a business, is coffee, come down and visit.
Right.
I don't even go to it's at school.
Right.
Your kids, you went to school, your kids went to school. Then come to the morning meeting and get a tour from, one of the kids, show you around the school. And the kids are so proud of the place, right? And then, okay, well, come on into the...
Yeah. I heard this in my kids' high school. They were my son and his buddy were sitting around, and they were being cynical high school kids. That gene was strong at that point. And they were saying, we spend all this time and energy talking about, I think it was Africa, but 4 miles from here in Dorchester, and we were flying people to go, that's right, it was a vacation trip to Africa to do community service. These kids from this pretty affluent high school were flying to Africa for 2 weeks, and the cynical high school boys were saying, we're spending all this money and oil and energy to get these people there for 2 weeks when 4 miles from here, the exact same problem exists, and and we could be much more efficient. Why aren't we? And I said, you're exactly right. What are you guys doing sitting here in the kitchen, right? You get in the car and drive down there and do something. Stop whining. Do something, right? But that could be the challenge sometimes if you're trying to start something. There's a great lesson in what you've accomplished. I think in thinking practically about how do you create passion.
Right.
The other thing I was going to offer from my experience is, your story helped reinforce it for me. I'm a big believer in backing the 26-year-old, back to your original question, but I think they have to be protected by someone with a stiff backbone who says they're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And they have to have a guy like you stand up and say, look, okay, I know she's 21, I know she's never done this before, and oh, by the way, there are going to be some screw-ups.
Yeah.
And I want you all to get used to that because I'm going to come back to you and tell you about a big problem, but I'm going to help fix it.
That's awesome.
And as long as that young leader has sort of a protection squad around, because a lot of these institutions are not tolerant of mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't create a culture that says we learn from mistakes and we're willing to talk about mistakes, and schools in particular, can get very resistant to learning from if you say like, when was the last time you guys all got together and had a meeting and said, okay, everybody throw up their biggest screw up this year. Let's learn, let's talk about it. What did you really screw up in the,
And if the leader says, I got one, right, first, transforms the room.
Right. But if you go in any hospital in America, once a month, the doctors all get together and have a secret meeting called Morbidity and Mortality, where a doctor has to get up and talk about a mistake with a patient. And all the doctors critique it. And it's protected from lawsuits by law, and they review mistakes. I'm a bandwagon, I don't mean to do that, sorry. But because I love it, that organizations do that. But that's what I'm a big believer in bet on the young, but protect them.
Well, Jeff, the great
it's
news
an interesting point on mistakes, right? Maybe that's the concluding message here from me.
Yeah.
I'm one of those kids that like you got to get an A because that's how you get into college, and then when you're in college, that's how you get a job, and you got to get more A's, and then when you get a job, you keep trying to get A's, right? Well, many of us really don't fail until we're somewhere down the line. In my case, I was 38 when I really screwed something up really bad for the first time. Really bad, like credit card bouncing. Jeff, what's going on here? Right? And I guess my message is you learn from making a mistake and don't be afraid, because it's not the end of the world. It just isn't. And I think this earlier in your life you figure that out, the better.
Chime in, I've had probably half a dozen Afghan gals as my executive assistant, always just out of high school. And my admonition to them was, if you don't make mistakes, I don't want you. Because you're not stretching, you're not reaching, you're not learning. And I said, I would appreciate you not making the same mistake twice. But it worked beautifully, absolutely beautifully.
All right.
Well, there's a great saying that I heard one guy say, he said, if you want to be an F-15 fighter pilot, if you want to train F-15 fighter pilots, you're going to splash a few planes. And they're going to be expensive planes, but if you want people to fly fighter jets, you're going to lose a few.
All right.
Jeff, the great news is you get to do this again. So thank you. That was
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you very much.